For self-employed professionals and small business owners, difficult clients appear to be a fact of life. You've doubtless heard people say things like, "Guess who I have to deal with today? Wish me luck." You may even have found yourself saying something quite similar. The assumption behind such sentiments is that there is something wrong with the client. The client is a difficult person. But what if the client is not difficult at all? What if the problem lies not with the client, but with the interaction between you? What if the client is not better or worse than you, but simply different? What if you could turn that client from someone you perceive as difficult into a valued partner? Seriously, is that really possible? It certainly is. It all begins with answering the all-important question, what color are you? Intrigued? Please stay with me to learn more. It all begins with the question, what color are you? Yeah, I know, it sounds a bit odd, but I promise to explain it as we go through. I'm Stephen Baroda, rabbi, educator, and I'm a certified professional. I help you to connect better with others by communicating on their wavelength instead of yours. I'm going to start my explanation a little left field with this cap. Now, what's special about this cap? It's an adjustable cap. It has Velcro on the back. So therefore, whether you have a smaller head or a larger head, the cap fits, which is a wonderful solution for a cap. The designer doesn't have to worry about size. The designers simply concentrate on the design, which is what they're good at. And then when a potential customer walks into a store or searches online and that design appeals to them, they just buy it and they don't have to worry about size. Really great solution for a cap. It's called a one-size-fits-all solution. But what is terrific for a cap is really terrible for almost everything else, and certainly when you're dealing with people. Because people are not all the same. IMA is a simple, universal, color-based language that helps you to communicate with people who have a different way of being. They're what we call a status of being, what we call also their comfort zone. What makes them comfortable and what makes you comfortable are not necessarily the same. In fact, there's some good news that of the 8 billion people approximately living on Earth at the moment, you actually have a lot in common with 2 billion of them, which is not bad. But on the other hand, there are 6 billion where you have less in common. And of those, a third of those, a total, again, of 2 billion, you really have very little in common with at all. So the aim of IMA is to understand what that is. Why is it that indeed you have a lot in common with only a quarter of the people that you come across? And then how do you communicate effectively and connect effectively with the other 75%? If you've joined us for the first time, welcome. I would really encourage you to subscribe to the channel. New material should be coming up approximately once a week, and you'll get a notification when that's the case. So please subscribe to the channel. Please share the video. I hope that you will agree after you've heard this video, but IMA has a lot of value to a lot of people, and therefore the wider we share it, the better the world can become. It's certainly the belief of IMA creator James Knight. He believes very strongly in IMA that he's put together over these last 20 years, and that it's the solution to most of the problems out there. if we can communicate and connect better and take away these obstacles that often get in the way of good communication. So in this video, I'm going to explain in 4 steps how we can in fact take a person who we currently find difficult and turn them into somebody that we can work with very, very well and have a cooperative relationship with them. Just before I explain the whole thing about the colors, I just want to focus in on another very, very well-known concept and show that it doesn't work the way that we've always been brought up to believe that it does. And that's a concept that's based on a verse in Leviticus chapter 19, verse 18, translated into English as, "You shall love your neighbor as yourself." And the common phrase that we know as an explanation of that verse is, "Treat others as you would want to be treated," which on the surface seems just fine. Because if I find something really uncomfortable, then probably not very good to treat the other person in that way. And if I am fine with something, it should be fine to treat the other person that way as well. But it's not true. Because, as I've already introduced you to the idea of the fact that we think differently from 3/4 of the people out there, and therefore we have to change the way we look at that. That principle is often known as the golden rule. There's a new version of it called the platinum rule, and that's the one that actually works. And it's treat others as they would want to be treated. And if you think about it, it's actually a better interpretation of what that verse is saying. Because what that verse is basically saying is, you love yourself, assuming you do. Self-love, healthy self-love is always a starting point, because if you don't love yourself, it's very hard to get on with others. But assuming that you have that, what is it that you do to yourself if you've got healthy self-love? You treat yourself in a way that makes you feel comfortable. You avoid uncomfortable situations as much as you can. You certainly don't purposely put yourself into uncomfortable situations, unless you're trying to test yourself, as some people like to do. But in general, we like to be comfortable with how we are operating. And so therefore, what do we want for our neighbor? We want them to be comfortable in the way they're operating. And what happens is, if you treat them in a way that is fine for the way you think, but not for the way they think, then you are actually making them feel uncomfortable, and therefore you're not loving them as you love yourself. Now, I'm going to explain this through the concept of 4 colors, and that's where the question comes in of, what color are you? The first step is to determine what color are you. So let me explain the fundamentals of AIMA, and then you'll understand how this whole concept of color is relevant. AIMA divides the world twice. First of all, it divides the world, and if you can just visualize a piece of paper, think of a horizontal line across the piece of paper. Below the line, you have people who are assertive, and above the line, you have people who are non-assertive. Assertive people are very happy to let you know what it is that they want. Non-assertive people are less comfortable doing that. They tend to be a little shyer. They tend to be people who will stay in the background a little bit more. So that's one important characteristic that divides people. Are you a person who is assertive or non-assertive? Now we're going to divide that piece of paper with a vertical line from top to bottom. And on the right-hand side, we're going to have people who relate to the world by relationships with people. The most important thing for them is how you get on with other people. You make decisions based on instinct. It's all about being open with people and open to new ideas. That's how you see the world. Loosely speaking, it's right brain thinking people. The other side of a left brain thinking people, and those people are people who make decisions based on facts and figures. They're going to think slower, they're going to be more deliberate, and quite often they're more closed in the way they think. They'll make a decision once, and it's much harder for them to shift to a different way of thinking. So these are these two factors. Now, if you can now visualize that piece of paper, you've got a line down the middle and a line going across, so you now have 4 quadrants. And those 4 quadrants, Eimer calls high red, high yellow, high green, and high blue. First, let me explain why we use the term high. Because even though we've said that people have these comfort zones, it doesn't mean that 25% of the world's population are exactly the same. As James Knight says, we actually are all as unique as our thumbprint, and therefore are a blend of colors. That's what makes us different. That's what makes us unique. But it's what makes us the most comfortable most of the time. Our status of being, where we will generally find ourselves the most comfortable and where we are most happy for others to behave. That's what our high color is. So we have high red, high yellow, high green, high blue. Let's see where they fit in. So let's start first of all on the bottom left. So the bottom left are people who are assertive and driven by facts and figures. We call them high red. Now, high red, they are very often the boss. Very often the C-suite people. Because they are people who are driven by goals. They're assertive, and therefore they're prepared to go out there and tell other people what's required to fulfill those goals if they are working with them. They can therefore sometimes come across as a little rude as a result, very direct. But with them, it's all about goals, achieving goals, doing it quickly. They'll look at the facts. They'll decide, yes, this makes sense. And once they've made a decision, they're going to go. We move now in an anti-clockwise direction. We come to the high yellow. Now, the high yellow is also assertive, but they make decisions more based on relationships. They are much more open. They are much more social. They love to network. They are the ideas people, not always as good at implementation, but very good at coming up with creative ideas, very, very adaptable. Now we go around to the top right, that's the high blue. Now, like high yellows, they are also driven by relationships, but they are non-assertive. So they're not going to start a conversation with you in general. It takes them a while. They are slow to trust. They are slow to build a relationship. But once they build a relationship, they're going to be friends for life. They love to brainstorm. They love to build groups. And they tend to be incredibly loyal. They're often the people who have been in companies for 20 plus years because they feel comfortable where they are. If they like the people, then they don't want to go anywhere else. And finally, on the top left of the chart, we have the high green. Now, the high greens are facts and figures oriented and non-assertive. They are driven by their thoughts, and their number one priority is accuracy. They love detail, and they love to make sure that everything is 100% accurate. Very often they're people who like to work on their own. Slowly, deliberately, they know what project they're working with, and they get it done, and they get it done expertly. It's not exaggeration to say that most of the IT has been developed by high greens, because they had the expertise and the patience and the follow through to take the idea and bring it to fruition. If the other color didn't exist, we'd probably still be waiting for the very first iPhone, because they would want to perfect it so much that we never would have got it to market, because that's how they are. It's never quite good enough. They're always worried about accuracy. So now you understand how I started this video. What color are you? The first step is to find out who you are. Now, you may already have an idea from listening to these categories, but I haven't got into a tremendous amount of detail. Where I do go into a lot more detail is in my free PDF. And I really do encourage you to go to stephenboroda.com/free download. You should see that link appearing on your screen now, stephenboroda.com/free download. And there I go into this in considerably more detail so that you can really get a really good picture of the characteristics of the high red, the high yellow, the high green, and the high blue. But for you to find out your color, there's actually a shortcut. In that download, there's actually a link to the IMA questionnaire, or you can just go directly to stephenboroda.com/questionnaire. Fill out the questionnaire. It's 10 questions, and if you answer it accurately, you will find out what high color you are. And that's the first step. Identify your high color. In fact, these steps are represented by the acronym IMA. I, which for trademark reasons is a lowercase I, stands for identify. So you identify your high color. Then you need to identify the high color of that difficult client. And although theoretically speaking, you could just ask them to fill out the questionnaire as well, chances are that's not really going to be something practically that you could really do. So therefore, that's why you need to learn more about how IMA works, really identify the characteristics of the 4 colors, and then it's going to begin to become natural. So once we know our high color and the high color of that client, then we can start recognizing the fact that it's not that they're difficult, it's just that they're different. They are the opposite color from you, quite possibly. Almost certainly, they are not the same high color as you. So then you have to go to the M of IMA, which is modify. You have to modify the way that you communicate, whether it's in writing or in the way that you interact when you speak to the person, so that you make them feel comfortable. Remember that rule that we said, that you need to treat others how they want to be treated? And then the A of IMA can stand for a few things. It can stand for adapt, first of all, and that means really that your goal is to be constantly adapting the way you behave depending on who the other person is with whom you wish to successfully interact. So today, you've learned how to work with a high blue. Tomorrow, your client could be a high yellow or a high green, and you're going to have to work with them as well. By the way, high red sometimes can have trouble even working with other high reds, because if you have 2 people who both want to be the boss, they both enjoy telling everybody else what to do, you can imagine that that's not always so easy. So again, you're going to have to find ways of working out, okay, when are you leading? When are you letting them lead? So these are the 4 steps that can create magic between people and turn a difficult relationship into a positive one. First step, identify your high color. Second step, identify the client's high color. Third step, modify how you behave and how you interact so that you're speaking on their wavelength and not yours, so that they feel comfortable. And then adapt to everybody so that you are able to, as it were, step out of your comfort zone for the purposes of making the other person feel comfortable, and therefore communicating far more effectively and connecting far more successfully. The A of IMA can also stand for accepting that people are different. And again, as I said before, no better or worse than you, just different. It can also stand for appreciate. And that's perhaps the highest level. If you can actually appreciate that other person, no longer looking at them as difficult because they're different from you, but actually realizing, wow, yes, that person is different from me, but they have attributes that I don't have. And wow, if we're working together on a project, how marvelous will that be? I heard a story recently of a small company that heard about IMA. There were 4 people running this organization. And when they did the questionnaire, guess what? 1 high red, 1 high yellow, 1 high green, and 1 high blue. And then they realized, wow, that's why we've been clashing so often. In theory, we like each other and we want to work together, but as soon as we sit around a board table, we just got problems. It doesn't matter what one person says, the other person seems to have a problem. Once they worked through this material, it was powerful because now you've got the strengths of all 4 colors working together on a project. And that's where the magic really happens. Once again, to really understand this and to get a real handle on what characterizes each of these 4 high colors, stephenbaroda.com/free download. If you've got value, please like the video, please comment, please share, and I look forward to seeing you grow through IMA. Thank you for watching.